Good morning, Faith Bible family. Merry Christmas and welcome to week 2 of our Advent video series. I know that last week I said that I was going to focus primarily on passages that aren't necessarily part of our traditional Christmassy sort of passages, and I promise the next week we're going to get back to that. But this week we are looking at a traditional sort of Christmas passage, and it's in John chapter 1. Hopefully, however, we're going to look at an aspect of this passage that maybe you don't see every year because it doesn't come through the clearest in our English translations. John chapter 1, verse 14 is one of the clearest statements to be found anywhere in Scripture about the identity of Jesus Christ. It towers over the rest of the prologue even, much like a high mountain peak over the rest of the mountain range. The Word became flesh, the incarnation. John wrote this verse with a lot of nuance, but some of that is lost in translation. Hopefully by the end of this video, however, we can climb that mountain to see the view that John always intended us to see. So we're in John chapter 1, verse 14 this morning. I want to set some context, and then we're going to read it together. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, without him nothing was made that has been made. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John begins his gospel with phrases right out of the first chapter of Genesis, that lofty description of God creating the world. God's creative acts in that chapter are some of the clearest examples of his divine power over everything and everyone in his creation, because he is the one who created it all. And now John says, the one who created everything has become flesh himself, has entered into his creation as a physical human being. It's wonderful, it's miraculous, but John is not just mirroring Genesis here for stylistic reasons. His story is the climax of the story that began in Genesis. See, God created the world for a purpose. It is there to be a place where he can meet with people. He wants to live with us and be our Emmanuel, God with us. But Genesis goes on to tell us that something went horribly wrong. We sinned and we were driven from God's presence. And for the rest of the book, God still speaks with his people, but he can't meet with them the way that he wants to, which then leads directly into the book of Exodus. Most people think that the book of Exodus is mostly the story of Moses and the Ten Commandments. But the story of Exodus does not climax in chapter 20 with the Ten Commandments, but rather in chapter 40 with the building of the tabernacle, and it culminates in verse 34. The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. God had once again a place where he could meet with his people. Which then brings us to John chapter 1, verse 14. The word which John uses as dwelled among us in that verse is a word that really means to pitch your tent or to tabernacle. John is telling us that Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of God's desire to live with us. And because of that, he is a conduit for God's grace and his truth. God dwells with us in a way that he never did in the Old Testament. He dwells with us physically as one of us. That's why we celebrate Christmas. And it is with that hope then that I can wish you a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again next week.